The United States faces a number of national security and foreign policy threats today. One man keeping a close watch on those threats is Van Hipp. He's chairman of American Defense International Incorporated. He recently spoke to the John Locke Foundation and joins us now to share some highlights from that presentation. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you see as the number one threat that we're facing today?
Well, it's a more dangerous world today than it was after the day after 9/11. And one of the main reasons is technology is changing faster than our government's ability to adapt. And so I say it's a more dangerous world. As technology changes, the threats increase exponentially. It's a combination of things. You've got radical Islam, but you've got North Korea, you've got cybersecurity, and it all kind of ties together in a way because Iran, a radical Islamist regime, is funding the North Korean threat, cybersecurity. The North Koreans now have a quantum encryption device. That's a scary thing, which the first country to win the race on quantum computing and random number generation could almost prevent hacking. So if they win that race, no matter what we do, it would be very tough to take out their system. So it's this president sure did inherit a mess.
So it sounds as if the biggest threat is the fact that all these other threats can now be more coordinated than they were.
Absolutely. And really technology is just changing so quickly, and unfortunately our government is so stovepipe. I think the 9/11 Commission said it best that 9/11 above all else was a failure of imagination. We're always responding to the last attack rather than thinking outside of the box to prevent the next one.
How do we then change our mindset and start preparing for these new attacks?
Well, we got to change the way the government does business. I think President Trump is trying to do the right things. He's got to get his people in the Pentagon. I've been saying it for a long time. Too many Obama holdovers. Get them out of there. There are many of Trump loyalists out there that he needs to put in the administration who will have his back, who'll do the right thing.
Let's take a look at some of the specific threats. I'm going to first of all start with one that's been quite a bit in the news, but for the reasons that the media has been fixated on the Russians and their attempt to influence the elections. Do the Russians, in and of themselves, do they constitute a major threat at this point?
You know, the Russian bear, all they ever really respect is strength, if you go back and look through history. And I've been saying that Vladimir Putin is just an old KGB agent who's been masquerading as the president of Russia. But they do oppose a threat, not to the extent that they used to, but they can sure be helpful to us if they wanted to. But as far as the Russian election shenanigans, I think that Jay Johnson's testimony to Congress was very significant. Didn't get as much media play, where Obama's own Secretary of Homeland Security said that there was no evidence that he saw that the Russian cyber attack influenced the election, altered any votes, or suppressed any votes. That's pretty strong from Obama's own Homeland Security Secretary.
Yeah, it certainly is. Let's turn to some of the other issues as well. You mentioned some of these. What about radical Islam? Radical Islam as a force. How important is it for us to be focusing on?
It's the challenge of our time. And I think King Abdullah of Jordan said it best. He called it World War III, in a war within Islam. That's why I think it's important for us to work with moderate and reform Muslims like King Abdullah of Jordan, also like King Mohammed VI of Morocco. It's a very strong ally. I just wrote an op-ed about the things that they're doing to help us in the war on terror. Those are the kind of people we need to be working more with. And also, what's going on in these mosques? I've called for a rewards program. If you see something going on in the mosque, if you come forward with actionable intelligence, I've called for a rewards program to encourage people in the mosque to come forward with actionable intelligence.
We are chatting with Van Hipp. He is chairman of American Defense International Incorporated. Another one of our potential threats that's been in the news quite a bit recently is North Korea, with all of these missile launches. What is your concern about North Korea these days?
It all comes down to that ballistic missile capability combined with a nuclear threat. I've looked at this for a long time, and we know they have the nuclear warhead design package of the infamous Pakistani scientist Dr. A.Q. Khan. And open source intelligence tells us that Iranians are en route to North Korea now. In the past, almost every time they've gone there, a nuclear test of some sort has followed. So that's the threat to America. I wasn't surprised by the ICBM launch last week. I wrote a piece back in 2012 documenting how they used an Unha-3 rocket to get a satellite in space. So we know they've had this they were getting very close to having an ICBM. But if they can, and this is what the president, I think, is watching for, we cannot allow them to have an ICBM that can accommodate a nuclear warhead. As you know, and I know they're doing all the diplomatic stuff now, a last attempt there, but the military option is still on the table, and we cannot allow them to have a nuclear warhead on an ICBM that can reach the United States.
Some people have said that it would be enough for them not to necessarily have the material that would cause an explosion on the ground, but to be able to launch something that would lead to an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse attack. That in and of itself could be a problem.
Absolutely, and the EMP Commission has said there is very strong evidence that they may already have 2 EMP warheads. And that would have the same effect of a geomagnetic storm in the face of the sun. We had one in 1859. That was the last one. And I tell people, if you don't believe me, listen to NASA. NASA says it is inevitable in the next 10 to 100 years that we will have another Carrington event. So we've got to harden the grid and have better transformer technology to get our grid up and running, and it's got to be a top priority of our Department of Energy.
Are there some threats out there that you see as important that people just don't even have on their radar at this point?
Well, for a long time I've been talking about North Korea, and I didn't think it was on the radar. So finally, I think people are getting it. And then the cyber threat. The cyber threat is the most complex national security challenge we've ever faced. I call it the 5th dimension of warfare, after air, land, sea, and space. And it's causing not only great national security harm to America, but great economic harm. Every year we're losing more intellectual property among our businesses, universities, government networks than in the entire Library of Congress. It is a major, major threat, and one that we've got to get out in front of.
To how big of an extent is it a problem when it's not just the bad guys trying to attack Defense Department computers or that sort of thing, but the people who are sending you these bogus Facebook requests or the spam email? Is that part of this problem as well?
It is. I mean, and the threats are coming from different sources. Primarily, when I say you have to distinguish, for example, between what the Islamists are doing and the Chinese are doing, because each requires different countermeasures from a cyber standpoint. The Chinese are more about espionage, and the Islamists are about sabotage. But I would say this: it is primarily a recruitment problem. One of the top experts, James Gosler, has said that we need about 30,000 true cybersecurity experts in America to thwart the worst kind of attack. We've only got about 1,000. I have been calling for national security scholarships on our college campuses and university campuses. Let's recruit the best kids we've got to go into cybersecurity and go into data security.